Hi folks, Seth Leapson here. Thanks for watching my monologue. In these uncertain times, you may be thinking about personal protection. If you are, I urge you to visit my friends at Guns Etc. They'll help you find the perfect protection for yourself and your family, and they can even teach you how to use it. They've been protecting Arizonans for over 33 years, and they stand for the great principles this country was founded upon. Or you can just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back to the show. Happy December 8th, 2020. First thought I had this morning was how we too often, and I'm willing to admit it may just be me, that I too often don't always prioritize the right things in life. That is to say, we too often confuse the critical with the less critical, or the critical with the frivolous. I think about these things a lot this time of year. What's important, what's not, what I misprioritize as important, and what I should value more. Maybe we all should. In The Crisis, Thomas Paine wrote, "What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value." I wonder if we think about that enough, the value we put in things by virtue of how hard we work to acquire or have them. A big part of this is gratitude, of course. Another great part is effort. Sometimes they go together, sometimes not. And when they don't, when we have gratitude for something great in our lives that we didn't necessarily work that hard for, as I understand it, we call that grace. Friends and friendships can be a big part of that. So let me just say off the top, let me just wish a very happy birthday to one of my dearest friends, Jim, who I am so grateful God put in my life and who I know everyone he has touched are equally grateful for. As you know, one of my favorite movies is The Wizard of Oz, and when the Tin Man approaches the wizard at the end, the wizard conveys two messages, says two important things to the Tin Man. One of them is too difficult to discuss. The other is exactly this, quote, "A heart is not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved by others," close quote. So if I can just once more wish a very happy birthday to my friend Jim, you are loved by tons of others, and it is my privilege to be one of them. In thinking, too, about that Thomas Paine line, "What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value," it's important to apply those words to our country and fellow countrymen just now. Sure, there, too, most of us have a grace about our patriotism. We didn't do that much to be Americans. By great fortune, we were simply born here. Most of us didn't have to take up arms to protect ourselves or our country either, and I don't know if we properly value all that right now, even in hard times. It's been a hard year for many, but we are not summer soldiers and sunshine patriots, or should not be. That's what Thomas Paine wrote. It's the line George Washington so loved of Thomas Paine's, that he had his men read it just as they crossed the Delaware. Part of that sentiment, too, explains why so many of us distrust and dislike the welfare state. Has anybody ever said or argued that the greatest welfare program the world has ever devised was the gift or subvention of simply being born in America, or being allowed to take up residence here legally? You think about the history of the world, or even the contemporary world, and you have to ask how many people in our world live in a country dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, recognizing that our liberty comes not from government but from God, and that it is the government's obligation and duty to protect that. A country promising, right up front, its citizens justice, domestic tranquility, a common defense, and security of our blessings. There is an answer. There is an answer to how many? Over 7 billion. And I think in a great sense, so much of our upset these days stems from being out of focus and out of sync with those great guarantees and promises. We, many of us, are even probably somewhat civically depressed about it all. Maybe too many have achieved these things or their version of these things too cheaply, and thus dearness and value has become elusive. Maybe their view of welfare is not being an American so much as being guaranteed other things, including the modern idea of welfare itself. We ought to snap out of it and pretty quickly, I think. For those of us who do love this country and treasure and value it so very much, we must remember just now our Wordsworth. What we have loved, others will love, but we must show them how. We must show them how. I don't expect to ever change or convert the mind of a hardened ideologue, especially one so drenched in hate. Perhaps think of a Ilhan Omar. What I do expect we should be able to do is reach and teach those who support her and give her the power she wields, exercises, and corrupts. It seems to me we have two polar choices right now, a lot more Omars or a lot more non-Omars. We fool ourselves in thinking she's a one-off or rarity or exception. There are an awful lot here, groomed and breeded by tens of thousands, if not millions, every year, every month, every week in schools throughout this country, paid for by the people of this country, paid for by people who don't even have children in schools or sometimes even children. You see, we about 19 years ago started worrying about the madrasas of the Middle East and Asia. If only we worried as much about our own schools and what they were teaching here. What they taught about America, Christianity, and Judaism in the madrasas is close to as problematic as what they are taught here, about the same. I recall once someone approaching us about putting American curricula in other nations to counter the madrasas. It was a bad idea. You can't fight a hardened ideology with a nullity. When a bottle is smashed, it no longer has anything of value in it. The remaining question is, can we put genies back in smashed bottles? I recall Mark Stein asking that question once. And it seems to me we'd better get to that question here and rather quickly. Forget saving the world a moment. You look around yourselves here, you look at November 3rd, and you have to admit we look or appear as the kind of country we and other countries used to send aid to. Conspiracy theories and paranoia, we are told, we swim in, breathe in, exist in. Outside the revisionism of the left, that is the new area our culture has moved to, and it's very one-sided. I'm often worried about planks and specks, and what the right in America is engaged in is specks. What the left is engaged in is planks, and yet they charge and accuse us of the opposite. How many times have you heard you're part of or engaged in paranoia or conspiracy theory? Well, there are conspiracy theories, and there are conspiracy theories. George Baker in the Wall Street Journal gets to some of this. Remember Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, D. Rhode Island? He thinks the federal judiciary has been bought by a dark money conspiracy controlled by the Federalist Society, as he memorably explained with visuals during the confirmation hearings of Amy Coney Barrett. Mr. Whitehouse isn't the only Democrat who can see through the thick timber of federal institutions to the dastardly plotters within. Remember the great Trump post office conspiracy? For a few weeks in summer, we were told by supposedly serious politicians and excitable people in the media that the president was stealing mailboxes to stop people from sending in ballots. And there was the widespread claim for much of the year, promoted by progressive politicians, commentators, entertainment figures, and others, that black people in America were being targeted for mass murder by police officers. We haven't even gotten to Russia yet. When the New York Post published its Hunter Biden story weeks before the election, much of the liberal-leaning intelligence establishment insisted it was probably a Kremlin plot. This was merely the latest installment in the vast Russian conspiracy that handed the election to Donald Trump in 2016. Many of the journalists who denounced the president's effort to discredit the election have been promoting these baseless assertions for years. It takes some chutzpah to declare that the Republican Party is in the grip of conspiracy theorists when you've spent 4 years spreading crazy stories to discredit him yourselves. Now, who has the plank and who has the speck, as I ask? Who told us for 5 years the notion of making America great again was a callback to racism from our past? And what kind of brain does it take to think America at its best or greatest means America as racist? That was a tell, too, that many missed. And so we were given the 1619 Project, just to make certain of this position, just as the left and progressives needed what you might call progressive insurance. America could and should not be loved because she was great. She should be condemned because her greatness was based on racism, they told us. What kind of person thinks that way? Turns out, millions. That's what smashed bottles lead to. That kind of junk thought. Or, as the Wizard of Oz put it, disorganized thinking. Delusion. So we have more of that, or less. We can be summer soldiers and sunshine patriot conservatives, upbeat and on the march when the going is good and when we have some power, or we can understand power in a republic ebbs and flows and is never permanent, knowing that the rational way of the world means that to shrink from our commitments in the winter, or when it seems darkest, or when we are not in power, is to shrink from the service of our country and our cause. I think we owe it to our country and our cause, and countrymen, to consider this. Though our souls may be tried, they are not tired, and that tyranny like hell is not easily overcome, as Thomas Paine wrote. We could understand this in the cold winter of 1776. How much easier should it be for us to appreciate and understand it now?